supported Ukraine since the start of the war. Over the past 4 years, our community has shown extraordinary generosity and compassion. Through Epsom-based Surrey Stands with Ukraine, residents across the borough have helped send more than £5 million worth of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. The council itself has also played an important part in this collective effort. Through its statutory responsibilities, it has worked constructively with the Epsom and Ewell refugee network that looks after dozens of Ukrainian guest families here. It has also shown goodwill by exercising discretion to waive business rates on Surrey Stands with Ukraine's premises, and recently supported the borough's Festival of Friendship with Ukraine, which brought together residents and Ukrainian guests in a powerful expression of mutual solidarity. Taken together, these actions show that Epsom and Ewell has already built meaningful ties with Ukraine. The proposal to twin Epsom and Ewell with the town of Bucha grows naturally from those relationships. Bucha is a community that mirrors Epsom in many ways. It is similar in size and character, and like Epsom, it's close to its nation's capital, around 25 kilometres from Kyiv, much as Epsom lies within easy reach of London. The long-standing and many times elected Mayor of Bucha has specifically extended a hand of friendship to Epsom and Ewell, expressing the wish that our borough become Bucha's first partner in the United Kingdom. And this would bestow upon our borough enormous prestige, locally, nationally, and internationally. Bucha is known internationally because of the terrible events that occurred there in the early months of the war. Atrocities against civilians, trussed up and left on the streets. But today it is a community rebuilding and looking to the future. Its mayor has made clear that twinning is not about seeking aid, but about building long-term cultural, educational, and civic connections. Importantly, the practical work of any twinning would not fall on the council. As with our long-standing twinning with Chantilly, the operational side would be undertaken by a volunteer association in the community. The council's role is to endorse the principle of the relationship and to allow a charter or other similar document to be signed, and we suggest as approved by the Chief Executive Officer. I appreciate the members are mindful of the forthcoming changes to local government, but the fact that Epsom and Ewell Borough Council will cease to exist next year should not prevent it from making positive decisions while it continues to serve the borough. Indeed, it may be particularly fitting for the council to leave a legacy that reflects the outward-looking character and its support for international friendship. Bucha understands the situation and knows that the practical work of twinning will be carried forward by volunteers here. Even during wartime, meaningful connections, necessary connections because of the war, can take place through online exchanges between schools, colleges, and community groups. These can offer valuable educational opportunities for young people here, while helping them understand the experiences of a community that has lived through the trauma of war. Chair, councillors, the people of Epsom and Ewell have already demonstrated remarkable solidarity with Ukraine. Supporting this twinning initiative would simply recognise and build upon that spirit of friendship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that door open or that door?
They're both open.
They're both
Okay.
open.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll pause the meeting while Lionel's let out of the building.
Right.
Okay, I've been informed that we can continue the meeting. So item number 2 is declarations of interest. Have any members got a declaration of interest they wish to declare? I have one. Item number 7, I'm going to withdraw, and I'd like your permission to move item 7 to the end of the agenda rather than me go out and have to come back. I'll just go and disappear, and with your permission, Hannah will take over as chair. Are you all happy with that? Yes. Let's.
Is it so complicated we have to delay it until the end of the meeting?
Sorry?
Is it so complicated that we have to delay it till the end of the meeting?
I'm suggesting that so that I don't have to go out and then you have to call me back in, just to make the meeting run smoother.
You don't vote on.
If you're happy, I stay. I'll. You've
Sorry, I've been clear. I think in light of the interest that's shared with me, you need to leave the room. So I would invite members to go with the chair's proposal that item 7 be moved to the final item on tonight's agenda.
Shanice.
Sorry, you've mentioned that you've got an interest, but you didn't actually declare what the interest was.
It's to do with one of the tenants, which is confidential, so I don't want to mention it. Are you all happy that item 7 is moved to the end of the agenda and Hannah's taken over? I'm getting nods and thumbs up, so we will do that. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings. They've been circulated. Can I have a show of hands? First of all, have anyone got any comments to make on the minutes? No, in which case, can I have a show of hands approving them and allowing me to sign them at the end of the meeting? That's not unanimous. Thank you. Yes. Kate put her hand up. So we now move on to item number 4, which is a council referred motion. Piero, do you want to introduce it at all? Or
Chair?
just go straight for it?
I think if we could invite Councillor Passand, who obviously has a right to speak before the debate.
In which case, Kuran, Sand, you open the debate, and then at the end of it, you have 3 minutes to respond to anything that's brought up in the debate, but you can't bring up anything new at the end. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to first raise my disappointment, and not being able to debate this at full council, especially with so many people in attendance. The council has done a lot to stand with Ukraine, and it is an important issue, especially with everything else that's going on at the moment.
I hear you.
Hey, can you hear me now?
If you lift it up even higher, I think that would be even better.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Yes.
Okay. Does that eat into my 3 minutes? Very good. The council has done a lot to stand with Ukraine, and it is an important issue, especially with everything else that is going on at the moment. So I'm glad that the recommendations are not simply to reject the motion, and that we're looking for a proactive solution to this. As Lionel highlighted, a hand has been extended, and we should consider the opportunity seriously. On that, I would just like to raise a few points on the recommendation of creating a working group. First, I've noted that the proposition or the composition appears to be 2 resident members and 1 member from other political groups. Given the nature of the issue, I'm not entirely clear why the working group would not instead be structured in a cross-party basis from the outset. Second, I question whether a working group is actually necessary in the first place. My concern is that it risks introducing additional process and delay, and where the core issue before us is relatively straightforward. Thirdly, if the aim is to simply clarify the terms of reference or scope, I do wonder whether those discussions could be taken place in committee instead, rather than establishing a separate body and then delegating it to the chief executive in consultation with the chair and vice chair to decide the terms of reference. Finally, I fully agree with the principle that we should not place unnecessary demands on officer time, especially in the context of LGR, but that actually points us to a different model, which Lionel highlighted in the speech. Our existing twinning with Chantilly operates through an independent community association. The council does not need to spend any money on it, nor does it require any officer time. The civic role of the council is simply to endorse and provide oversight. The proposal for Booker is intended to follow exactly the same model, with the Booker Epsom Association undertaking operational work, so we have a basis to work from. This will also allow resident input from the outset and help us to share the appropriate approach with them and any unnecessary changes that we need to highlight. For that reason, I'm not convinced that creating a working group is the most appropriate response. And my concern is that simply delays and risks the opportunity drifting when a community-led approach under council supervision may already provide a workable solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that's now open for debate. Have any councillors got anything they wish to say? Councillor Chin, followed by Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're living in very challenging times at the moment, and wars affecting Ukraine and the Middle East such a terrible impact on people's ordinary lives. The working group, I understand why it's been requested, and I understand that terms of reference need to be decided, but I do wonder that a working group could just carry on forever and ever and ever, and I wonder if there are better ways to do it. That we don't agree it tonight, but we're very clear to the proposers of the twinning. This is what we need. This is what we want. Send this to us, and then we can agree it rather than going through the working group meeting. I have been in various working groups in this council that just go on forever. So whether we're just very clear, we can just happily send an email to say this is what we need. Give us this information. It can come back to the next SNR and then be agreed or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Recommendation 3 is to invite the working group to provide an update on its efforts at the next scheduled meeting of this committee. So we're already assuming this is accepted, planning to come back to the next committee meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like the committee to give some direction on exactly what is needed to expedite this and make it happen as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree that the work of the working group could be delegated to a community or voluntary group to carry out the work, and they could be supervised by the council as opposed to council officers carrying out the work and councillors actually committing time to this. I do agree it's something that should go ahead and something that's actually important, but I don't know that we should use the time that we have on this, especially with the pressures around LGR and officer time and resource that has been highlighted by the council. So I don't know, if there's any comeback to that.
Thank you. I'll come back or get an officer to come back in a minute on that. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that the most appropriate way to save time is to do the working group. I feel historically when we've introduced and done most things like this, we do a working group so that that group can go away and work with, in this case, the charity, the organisations that are having something to do with it. It means those close conversations can happen and that we don't miss any details. Where actually I feel the opposite, that actually by bringing it back to SNR and trying to do all through committee, actually we may miss those little details because the working may not be as close.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I think just in the interest of fairness for speakers, it's worth highlighting that the speaker spoke for 4 minutes 20, at least according to my timing. And I can see in our rules that you're only supposed to speak for 3 minutes. I know I've been held to that condition as a councillor in attendance. So it's just a point of fairness for all speakers. On this topic here, I actually do agree with the working group being needed, because one of the things when I've interacted with some of the people from the Buca Epsom Association is I've said, if the council is being asked to endorse an organisation, the council needs to know what it is endorsing. For example, the Chantilly is a good example. They have a website, they've got some AGMs, it's a little bit out of date. They say who's on the committee, they say what they're about. There's a little bit about them. It's clear what the council has endorsed because I can see it as a member of the public. As a councillor, both at the original motion and here today, I've searched the Buca Epsom Association. I can't actually see what we're being asked to endorse. When I look at the motion that says recognise the Buca Epsom Association as the lead organisation in the borough responsible for the twinning activities with Buca, I don't know what that is. So I think it's completely fine for a working group to be made to sort this out. And as Councillor Chin has said, for that working group to just be really clear and say, look, we understand the principle here. It's worked with Chantilly. It could work with Buka, but we just need to understand what you are, who's on it, how it's going to work, and then there can be a councillor endorsement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Pierre, would you like to respond to the comments that were made by Councillor Colton?
Yes, happy to, Chair. So just for the avoidance of doubt, I believe what the councillor meant by way of delegation was it in terms of trying to have that voluntary support rather than making decisions on behalf of the council. So just if anyone was unclear, grateful. So yes, I think the scope of the working group, and that's why the recommendations are to be as flexible as possible so that meetings can start as soon as possible. There's one issue I was going to bring to the committee's attention. Obviously, this report was published prior to the last update of proportionality. So in terms of recommendation 1, you'll note that we have said there at the time there was an equal split between the Labour, Liberal Democratic, Conservative group. That's since changed. So in terms of the seat, that should actually go to the Labour group. But as we've established at other committees, if they don't wish to take that seat and wish to allow one of the other opposition groups to take that seat, perhaps we could clarify who would like to nominate themselves to be part of this working group this evening, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Chin, I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I do. Just looking at recommendation 2, nominate and authorise the Chief Executive in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair to settle the terms of reference. And I will vote for the recommendations if we quite quickly get some timescales on this. We've had email after email. Oh, we're so busy, we're so busy, we're so busy. So I would ask that we set a timescale for it to happen within 2 or 3 weeks at the maximum. I know the Lib Democrats and myself, I'm quite happy to be nominated for the working group and try and make this happen as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dalton.
No, I mean, I endorse what we're trying to do. We want to go at speed, but I don't know with the pre-election period if we're able to meet until after the election on the 7th of May. Therefore, it's the better thing, if this is supported by the committee, to find a date the week after that so that this can move at speed. But my understanding is we can't do it in this pre-election period, but looking to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So just to say, the working group can meet during the pre-election period, but not in public. So clearly, I think the immediate issue is who wants to be nominated. Second, if the recommendations are passed, I think it's best then left to the Chief Executive to liaise with those 3 members of the working group in terms of timing, rather than necessarily placing a timescale that might have implications to do with the pre-election period.
Thank you. Any further comments from councillors? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say I'm happy with Councillor Chin being nominated from the opposition parties here, although I was happy with that prior to this, but I'm also happy with it with Pierre's update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Humphrey Reynolds.
Chairman, you can call me what you like, it's not very polite. I'm a bit concerned about all this because it does sound a bit one-sided. Out of 3 members, 2 of them are going to be RA and the other one from the opposition. Do they not need 2, or do we therefore need 3 RA people? I mean, I'm a bit puzzled how this has been sorted out.
If it assists, Chair, this follows the same proportionality calculation we use for all committees. Councillor Winston. Indeed, yes. So based on the current allocation of seats. No, I wasn't going to go into the calculations, but yes, I think the only update was to reflect, in light of the most recent one, the groups that could take the. I won't get into the politics, councillor, but clearly we've just ensured that the proportionality mirrors the legislative requirement. Thank you.
Right. So, Councillor Chin, I believe, has been nominated by Councillor Lawrence. Are you all happy that Councillor Chin is the nominated person from the opposition groups? Can I have a show of hands for that, please? Okay, that's the majority. So I'll move on to the recommendation. The committee is asked to approve the creation of the working group comprised of 3 members. Sorry. Right, you and me? We're right. It will be myself and Councillor Hamilton. Any objections to that? All in agreement?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't hear. It was you and who else? Sorry.
Councillor Dalton. Are you all in agreement with that? Thank you. That was the majority. So we move on to the recommendations that are in front of you. Approve the creation of a working group, nominate and authorise the chief exec in consultation with the chair and vice chair. Sorry. I have written it down as well. I apologise. Kiran Prasad, you have the right to reply up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I fully endorse Councillor Chin being on the working group alongside you and Councillor Dalton. Just to highlight, I still do believe that it should be a cross-party effort, but I do understand the monitoring officer's rationale as to it being proportionate. Just to echo or no, to highlight Councillor Lawrence's concerns, very valid. It is early stages of the deciding of details on that, but I'm happy to provide further information if he needs. And yeah, thank you for pushing ahead with this, and I hope we can get a satisfactory solution quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. I will now go to the vote. There's 3 in front of you. Approve the creation of a working group, nominate and authorise the chief exec in consultation with chair and vice chair, and to invite the working group to provide an update at the next scheduled meeting of this committee. Councillor Reynolds.
Well, you can crash ahead, Chairman. The item 3 is really something that won't be decided tonight. It'll be decided later, won't it? So we're going to have to take that on trust.
No. We can, I believe, I don't think there's a problem with the next, although it's in the next municipal year, I don't think there's a problem with it coming to the next committee.
Just
You're shaking your head. Does that mean I'm wrong or I'm
no,
right?
to confirm for the record, Chair, you're correct. So
there is no problem with it coming to the next committee. I think the next committee meeting in June.
I believe it's July.
July. So that should give us plenty of time to sort it all out. So can I ask for a vote of hands on those 3 recommendations, please? Approved. Right. So show of hands for the first 2. That's unanimous. And a show of hands for option 3. Not option 3, recommendation 3, to invite the working group to provide an update. That's the majority, so that's carried. Thank you very much. We will move on to item number 5, which is appointment of members and chair of the shareholder subcommittee. This is something that comes around every year. The names are in front of you. It's myself, Councillor Dalton, Councillor Beckett, Councillor Chin, and Councillor Lawrence. Are there any questions on the report? In which case I will go straight to the recommendation that those people are nominated as the paper, Don White paper, isn't it? Yes, appoint members and chairs. So are you all in agreement with those members of the subcommittee? Please show your hands just to confirm I've got it. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thornhall Bungalow. Last year we agreed a renewal of the lease for 1 year. It's come back this year and it's proposed that we have a 3-year lease. I think the NHS are in a slightly better position, but I'll hand over to Mark Shepherd to update and summarise the introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report has come before this committee several occasions before. We've had an annual renewal process because funding was uncertain to begin with. The NHS are now in a position where they have longer term funding, and this paper is suggesting a 3-year term to provide both parties with longer term security. Thank you.
Any questions? In which case I'll go straight to the recommendations. Renew the existing 1-year lease with a 3-year subject to an optional break, and nominate the head of property and regeneration to take all necessary actions. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Agenda item 7 is moving to the end. So agenda item 8, which is a strategic priority 4, the community asset review. This is a report which is a progress report for us to note, and there's more work to be done on it. Mark, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. It's just to point out that several of the appendices are draft status reports as of December 2025. So, of course, they don't capture events that have happened since then. For example, councillors changing parties, or indeed the recent decision regarding the museum. Thank you.
So the recommendations is note the updates and progress made set out in the report. He does. Agree to complete the more detailed phase 2 work and the release of the money. Alex Coley, you have 3 minutes to state whatever you want to state.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the Chief Executive for keeping notes, so we will know what everyone's supposed to be doing. I had a look at this with great interest. Very interesting what's gone into it, but it didn't really feel joined up. It's all about CGR, and there doesn't seem to be a plan B. No, we're not progressing with CGR. That work has now been concluded. And there seems to have been a last-minute shift to this is suddenly about LGR. I looked at the original strategic priority wording, which talked about market values. It talked about costs. Market values are not provided here. In fact, it's a little bit strange that was asked for in the first place, because I understand that unless you know what you're going to use the building for, it's not really possible to establish a market value. So I guess that was never going to be fulfilled. On costs, we already know from our budget book and asset register what the costs will be, and I see they've been reproduced here. But again, we knew that before May last year. The recommendation is for £30,000 to be spent on a phase 2 business case. We might ask, why don't our other community assets need a business case for transfer to the new unitary? Everything will be transferred to the new unitary. So why these 3 or so assets and not others? Looking through the report, it is a bit worrying in terms of accuracy that we have a building named Epsom Courthouse listed here. I'm not aware of what Epsom Courthouse is. It does mention your courthouse, then it also mentions Epsom Courthouse, so I'm not clear on what that building is. Regarding the Community and Wellbeing Centre, we had a strategy and resources meeting last year where our senior surveyor told us in that public meeting that that building was going to be redeveloped. So I'm a bit confused why it's in here for a business case if it's going to be redeveloped, and you know what we will and won't invest in for that building if it's going to be knocked down and turned into something else. There doesn't seem to be a good reason to progress this £30,000 worth of work. We are going to be in a new unitary within 13 and a half months, and this seems like a unitary job, not a borough council job, especially since not all the buildings are included in this, and one of them is going to be redeveloped. So I hope that we won't spend any more money on this and conclude the business. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I open it to members for their comment. Oh, do you want to say anything more, Mark? No. Right, I open it to the members. Councillor Shin. Right. Thank
I
you.
think I got hold of this report on Friday night, so I apologise if I'm not on top of all the comments on it. I thought we were supposed to get reports 5 working days before committee meetings, but this certainly didn't happen in this case. And it's quite a lot of and I'm not criticising officers for that. I think it was a fast moving scene, but I'm quite, I'd like to ask the chair of this committee if he thinks that's acceptable and what's going to happen in the future to make sure we do get reports in a timely manner. 2 days, well, it's not even been, yeah, it's been 1 full working day before the meeting. As Councillor Coley mentioned, it's not kept up with what's happening. So, for example, so Appendix 1, talking about page 33, I can't remember which one that is. I think that's, and it's mentioning I can't remember which Appendix 1 is. So it's the main, the one looking at lots of, and it said meetings once new boundaries is known. The boundary, so it's not old report, so the boundaries have been known for quite some time. So I'd like to ask if these meetings have been now progressed with the new boundaries now formalised. Bourne Hall, Appendix 2, Bourne Hall alternatives for the large bungalow. That's already been decided for one of those, so that's a bit out of date. Appendix 3, Bourne Hall, it mentions a business plan and a communications plan. Neither of those as extra appendices, neither of those are present. And then we look at the Longmead Centre staff structure. It mentions the senior coordinator in post by late 2024. And then it says, later on, it says the senior coordinator, once they are in post, will do various actions. But actually, they should have been in post for over a year. So I think the whole thing just needs updating before the committee can seriously consider it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I want to reiterate what was said at the beginning. These are draft reports. It's still work in progress, and the purpose of them coming to this meeting is to note the progress made so far and not to criticise the reports. I'm sure the Mark would welcome comments on what's missing or what needs to be added or what needs to be replaced. So if you've got the time and willingness, they're very gratefully receive emails on this. But the purpose is not to approve these reports as they are.
So, sorry, Chair, I'm not criticising what's in front of us. I'm criticising that it's come to committee at this point, which I presume was the RA decision that this could happen, rather than either delaying the committee or delaying the reports.
But they've come so that you can see where we are, and they've also come so that we can approve further money if that's the decision of the committee, so that they can be completed. Do you want to add anything to that, Mark?
No, that's absolutely fine, Chair.
Right. I will apologise for the late report coming to you, but they are draft, and you're not being asked to approve the content, which would be, I think, unreasonable. So, any further comments, Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your consideration on the timings of when the report was published, because it came out on the Friday and in the afternoon, and it was about 100 pages to read through, and then to read through sending questions, which I did. I appreciate sometimes things happen, but as we've just heard, this report was done on in December 2025. So it's strange why this came as such a last minute thing for us to read if the reports were written 3 months ago. Anyway, that aside, general comments on this item. As a general principle, I'm not a huge fan of transferring over community assets outside of democratic control, whether that's to voluntary organisations or charity organisations. It feels like it gets taken out of the community's democratic hands. General point. It has also had backfiring in the past For example, in Sutton, there was the Sescombe Theatre, if I'm saying that right. So back in 2015, that was handed by Sutton to a charitable organisation. They couldn't pay for it. About 18 months later, it was handed back. Of course, that's just one example, but it's just illustrating the problem. When looking through these reports we have in front of us, it feels a little bit like we're starting to step on the toes of a unitary council, particularly when I see lots of analysis of other community assets in surrounding boroughs. That is the sort of analysis I would expect to be done by the unitary when they're looking at strategic view of East Surrey and deciding where they want to put their services, how they want to strategize, how they want to streamline their services. So I just find that a little bit odd that we seem to be duplicating that work now. As for the report itself, it is a little bit strange to have a report brought in front of committee with very obvious errors in. You know, Epsom Courthouse and Ewell Courthouse, that's strange. Also in the report, one of the crucial things I thought would be to know what our full-time equivalent staff is at these buildings. Yet for two of them, I believe it is Playhouse and Community Wellbeing Centre, it says the full-time equivalent for staff isn't known, which I find strange. So I'm in a position where we have these draft reports in front of us that don't feel like they've been proofread. They're put in front of committee just to note, apparently not to criticise, as you say, and to ask for another 30,000, even though in the reports they talk a lot about transfer to community organisations or to parish councils, which we know isn't going to happen now as a full council. So from my view, I don't feel a need to throw good money after bad. I'm not in favour of allocating another 30,000 towards this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Goldman?
So I just had a question that was linked to what Councillor Lawrence had just said. It just follows on from what he said. You know, given that we are transitioning to a new unitary authority, why are we developing long-term business cases for assets that may not remain under this council or will not remain under this council's control?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dawson?
Can I just make a couple of comments? So obviously we had a council meeting last Thursday where we made a decision around what was or wasn't happening with CGR, and these reports would have been written in advance of that. So I think, you know, I think there has to be some maturity and pragmatism, being pragmatic around timing of reports and timings of meetings and the flow of things. And obviously the meeting last week was brought forward from where it was meant to be. The other thing, as part of LGR, we're all being asked, every council, to look at everything. And so whilst it might feel like it's stepping on the stones of, for those of us who are on the joint committee and implementation plans, everybody's being asked to look at everything right now. It is part of that process to be able to get us to readiness for next April. I think it's also fair to say that being in Surrey, we are ahead of where everybody else is. And I think a little bit we are the guinea pig for what's going on elsewhere. So whilst it's not perfect and linear and it's not as nice as you would want it to be, we're all having to do it and learn it as we go. And that is quite challenging for everybody involved. So I think I get that reports are late and I get that that's not ideal, but I also get that we're in a very situation. And I think just some understanding of that with it would be kind of beneficial for everybody, because it's not going to be perfect, and you know there's not a lot we can do about that either.
Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think some of the problems about what you call the building in your court have been sorted out by these papers received as this meeting started. They may have been wrong to start with, but I think they've been put right now.
I didn't catch that.
The papers might be right from what was done.
Okay. We have used Vaughan Hall, Playhouse and the Wellbeing Centre as the three likely buildings to be considered for transfer to community. We're not going to get the community parish councils or community councils, but that doesn't stop them being transferred as a community asset at a later date. And we've had one very big success, the Horton, which is a building that was gone to the community and has been running very successfully. So it can be done. And by doing this work, we put ourselves in a position where we at least understand what the situation is and can make better decisions on that. Now, we could leave that to the unitary, but in my view, it would be better for us to do that so that unitary has got that information and decisions can be made either by the unitary or even before the unitary if that's appropriate. I've seen a number of hands go up. Councillor Lawrence, followed by Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what you and Councillor Dalton are saying. I would say it's a little bit, as Councillor Collier said, it's a little bit strange that we focus on just these three for a business case, but I do understand that they are our largest community assets. As for transfers to community organisations, I feel, given that in the reports they talk about these buildings having deficits of around £500,000 a year, that my warning about the Sescombe Theatre or Seacombe, sorry, Theatre would be quite on our minds here. I don't know the Horton's finances, but I doubt that they have a £500,000 deficit a year that's being funded from somewhere. Could be wrong on that. But the information I'm seeing in front of us would already preclude handing it to a charitable organisation. So that's part of why I don't think it's worth spending another 30,000. It's pretty clear that these cannot be run by a charitable organisation. That was why there was an attempt to start a parish council, which would have taxing power to subsidise it. That isn't happening. The reports talk about that, the status reports, but we know it's not happening. So whilst I take Councillor Dalton's points that the vote happened on the Thursday and then these were released on the Friday, the report was released after, and the report doesn't have any mentions of CGR, even though the status reports do. So I don't think it's worth spending 30,000 when we already know they have about £500,000 deficit. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Goldman, followed by Councillor Chin.
Thank you, Chair. Just another comment, just to make it clear that I don't agree that we should be releasing £30,000 towards this work. I'm not convinced that we're not creating liabilities and constraints for the successor authority.
Councillor Chin.
Chair, I completely agree that the Horton has been a massive case of success for the Horton, the community and the borough. I was elected in 2015. The Horton had already been in discussion for at least 2 years before I was elected. And I think it took another 2 years, maybe longer. In fact, I'm sure it was longer before that was actually happened. And it was all agreed and it all went through. There isn't that time available for those sorts of things to happen now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. The advantage of moving them to community assets to the community rather than run by the council is you can get grants, which the council can't apply for. You can get volunteers to run it, which means it saves money. So that there are advantages of moving it to the community. And I'm not trying to judge whether they should or shouldn't, but I think we ought to be looking at getting a business case so that we can make a better decision. Councillor Chin.
I totally agree with you. I actually suggested moving the playhouse to a community, to a charity or to external organisations in various budget speeches over the last few years. Not disagreeing with that at all. It just takes time and that's not something this council has got. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any further comments by councillors at the moment? In which case, sorry, Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what others are saying, but I actually think you're disagreeing with yourselves in some ways. We're saying that as a council, we're in deficit and we're struggling with them. So I see it as a positive to give that to the community and to let them do what they've done with Horton. I'm hearing that we don't want to spend the extra money to make sure these business plans are done correctly. We've all had comments about the paperwork not being good enough and the full information not being here. And I feel that, yes, there is more money being spent, but without spending money, we can't get the full details. My concern would be that, yes, we haven't got much time, but if we go to unitaries, and as we've said, on paper, some of these properties don't look as strong as others, they will straight away sell them, get rid of them. They will not, I believe, have the same interest as us in our local things. There is a bigger area to look at. So I think we just need to be very careful about saying unitaries will save things for us. We cannot guarantee that.
Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to respond to Councillor McIntyre's comments in that we do need to be careful. I think we really need to start being careful. We need to stop spending money to look at things. We spent money to look at CGI. It didn't work. It was a lot of money. That money's gone down the drain. We can't get it back. We're now proposing to spend £30,000, which is also a lot of money. If we've got a lot of money to spend, let's spend it on infrastructure. Let's spend it on the community, things that people living in the borough and working in the borough can actually benefit from. Let's stop just throwing money down the drain, looking at things.
I need to respond to that because about nearly a year ago now, this council, full council, agreed to a number of priorities. One of those priorities was to look at parish councils or community councils, and from memory, nobody objected at that time. I think there were people that abstained, but certainly everybody wanted to look at those priorities. I may be corrected by the officers, but I think that was the case. We have gone to the communities, we have asked our residents what they wanted, and we responded accordingly. We are now going through another priority, which was to look at our buildings, which we agreed at the same meeting, and this is the next step on that. So we are actually doing what we said we'd do nearly a year ago, and we're showing progress towards what we want to achieve. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, me and I believe some other opposition as well did speak quite extensively against the strategic priorities of the work full council, and I believe from a year ago I voted against it. But that aside, I do agree with you that the council did vote for these to be priorities. It makes sense that they're brought in front of us today for an update. I'm glad that you've done that, Chair. I just don't believe that it is worth spending another 30,000 on it, given what we have, knowing that we have a business plan from 2019, for example. I don't feel this is good use of money. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. I want to be careful of what I say, but I do think it's important for me to respond to that. Yes, councillors may have agreed to looking at CGR and spending money, but I think it's important to also say that you know, pre-meetings are held, and in those pre-meetings, councillors are pretty much guided down a certain path of direction when it comes to supporting or not supporting recommendations that are put forward. So I don't necessarily think that's fair.
I don't see how I can respond to that. Everyone has a free vote at council unless they're whipped, and certainly the RA are not whipped. Officers, would you like to respond to what's been said so far?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment on Bournehall. From an officer perspective, the advantage of going forward with the work would be that now that we've got greater certainty with LGR, we would be able to assess Bournehall in the context of the new unitary. So yes, currently with it operating with us as Epsom and Newell Borough Council, we're having to subsidise it. But the business case would look at the building in the context of if it's the unitary, and of course the unitary has control over the library as well as the elements of the building that we have control over. So it would provide additional benefit compared to any previous report that's been done. Thank you.
Are there any further comments before I go to the recommendation? In which case I'll move to the recommendation. Recommendation 1 notes the update and progress made as set out of this report. Recommendation 2, agree to complete the more detailed phase 2 work at a cost of 30,000 to set out in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.4. And number 3 is to agree to release the 30,000 phase 2 funds from the LGR reserve, which has been put there for that reason. Can I have a show of hands in favour of that recommendation, please? For those against? 3. So it is carried by a majority of 4 to 3. Thank you for your comments. Moving on to agenda item number 9, strategic priority 3, 70 East Street. Right, as you all are aware, 70 East Street was put up for sale, and that was agreed at full council, and we have had considerable interest at 70 East Street. So I'm being asked to let Alex Coley speak for 3 minutes. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great shame that one of the 5 political groups on this council have been prevented from viewing the appendix of information on the sale of East Street. I know that we'll be told that this restriction is driven by the proportionate allocation of seats to the Strategy and Resources Committee. I note that the majority are a group which dictates what seats are offered to each group, declined to allow any seats on SNR for the independents that I lead. The outcome being that independents are blocked from viewing this information, which I think is a terrible shame. We have the leader of the independent group at the LGA with us today, and I do recall that when we had a singleton Conservative who was refused committee seats, a great deal was made about how independents across the country are often singletons and offered seats, and what a hypocrisy it would be that we didn't do that, and there might be consequences. So as the leader of an independents group, who were offered no seats at all on Strategy and Resources, for which the perhaps unintended outcome is that we are not allowed to see such critical information. That seems desperately unfair for a group of independents. And I hope that that situation can change in future.
Thank you for your comments. Unfortunately, and I think it is unfortunately, we've been put in this position because previously confidential information has been leaked. And therefore we have to be extremely careful that information is now not leaked, knowing that we have problems with that. And so,
sorry, I wouldn't normally do this, but please don't accuse my councillors of leaking information. We have not leaked any information.
Alex, I don't know who leaks the information, which is why we have to be so careful about who has access to it and the situation that's put us in. Councillor Chin.
I think that's grossly unfair to say that it could have been because of not sharing information amongst different groups of councillors. I know I've personally had a complaint that I'd possibly leaked information, completely foundless, no evidence, no basis for it. I think it's shameful that we're making these accusations when it could have been any member of the council.
I have not accused any member of the council of leaking. I've said there has been a leak by a member of the council. I don't know who it is. But what we do have to do now is to be ultra careful as to the information we have and who sees it. And that's why we're in the position we're in.
Chair, I'm sorry, it's not logical to say that you can't share it with different groups because of leaks. Then you shouldn't be sharing it with anybody, or we should be signing non-disclosures or whatever. I don't know, but it's not a political thing that people are leaking.
I'm sorry, but what I have said is a statement of fact. It has been leaked, information has been leaked in the past, and we're now having to be very careful about confidential information because it's not our decision. It's there are other companies involved and other decisions that have got to be made. So we are where we are. Moving on. James, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I understand what you're saying. I don't see you accusing me or us here as leaking it. I understand what you're saying there, but we have to be careful that we don't go too far in restricting information, because there has, as Councillor Coley says, there has been an unintended consequence here where the only the only group that can't see it is the independent groups on the council, even though they have the same number of seats as the Liberal Democrat group and the Conservative group. I understand the basis of we're on the committee, the independents aren't, but there has been an unintended consequence there, Chair, and I think it's just worth considering the balance between needing to maintain confidentiality, which I understand and agree for this, and allowing all councillors of our council to be involved in decision makings. Thank you, Chair.
And I agree, and it's a pity we're in the situation we are what we are. Anyway, moving on to the actual agenda item. 70 East Street has now been marketed, and we've had a number of responses. Mark, would you like to update us? If we need to move on to the confidential part, we will have to move the people out of the gallery and close the link to the public.
Thank you, Chair. The public elements of the report has provided as much information as it can. We detailed how many offers we've received. The property did receive good interest, so that's very encouraging. And the exempt part of the paper is a recommendation from our external commercial property agents who marketed the premises. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any councillor want to comment on the report on the white paper as opposed to the restricted? Councillor Goldman.
Just wanting to say that upon reading the papers, I came to the same conclusion that the external recommendation found. Yeah, without sharing the detail, I don't know if councillors in attendance are going to be privy to the detail that's in this. So yeah, I'm in support.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm similar to Councillor Goldman on this. I did have a question on the recommendation, so all on white paper stuff. So from looking at the previous recommendations that were done when concluding the Rainbow Leisure Centre contract, I know it's a bit different because there was a tender. We had approved preferred option, and then as a recommendation, if that falls through, prefer second option. I'm just looking at the recommendations we have here before us, which is to go to the highest unconditional offer, but nothing about if that falls through. I'm minded to add a recommendation to authorise the second highest unconditional offer to go through. You can have a look in the packs. The wording, my suggested wording for this would be agree the sale of 70 East Street to the second highest unconditional offer in the attached exempt Appendix 1, should the sale be unable to be finalised with the highest unconditional offer. That's me taking the wording from the Rainbow Leisure Centre and from these recommendations here. If it's not needed, do please provide an explanation. Otherwise, I think that would be useful to make sure we move at this at pace. Thank you, Chair.
I need a seconder for that, and that's Councillor Chin.
Councillor Goldman had a.
Councillor Goldman.
It's not necessarily in the recommendation, but it does say. Oh, right, okay. I think it is covered already in the papers.
It is getting from the public paper.
Okay.
We can't talk about the.
Right. Okay.
If you want to talk about the pink paper, we have to exclude the press and public. Do you wish to talk? Okay. Councillor McIntyre.
I just think it's sorry, thank you, Chair. I just think it's slightly difficult to just say the second highest bid without the unconditional offers, because there's some.
I think what was being said was that we take, if we don't get the highest unconditional offer, for some reason that falls through, we take the second highest unconditional offer. And I personally think that's fairly sensible.
The only thing I wanted to check, sorry, Chair, was so that we feel that the ones that have conditions on them, even though they might be of more value, the conditions are not worth. Okay,
Right.
That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'll explain my reasoning without stating what's in the pink paper. But for those that have the pink paper in front of them, just turn to a specific page, which is page 10. I'm not going to say what it is, but you will see in there, in one of the last paragraphs, a sentence, which I'm not going to read out because it's in the exempt paper, but you will see on the main paragraph before the end a sentence that talks about a reason why my recommendation is useful and why I'm only talking about the second one. Hopefully that explains my reasoning a little bit more without saying anything more on that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dalton.
I think what Councillor Lawrence is making sense. Councillor Chin has seconded it. I think without pussyfooting around anymore, perhaps we just agree that we go to a vote about whether we can add that recommendation and then go to the substantive item.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
So all those in favour of adding that additional recommendation, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. So with that additional recommendation, we've got the recommendation in front of us to agree the sale of 70 East Street to the highest unconditional offer as recommended in the attached Appendix 1. The number 2 is now agreed the sale of 70 East Street to the second highest unconditional offer should number 1 fail for any reason. And number 3, nomination authorise the Director of Environment, Housing and Regeneration, Director of Corporate Services and Head of Property and Regeneration to take all necessary actions further to the above decision being made. So can I have a show of hands approving that, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That leaves agenda item number 7, for which I am going to.
Forgive me, Chair, we've got item 11, which was published as an urgent item.
It was, and it's not on the agenda. Agenda item 11. Which is the urgent decisions. Thank you. Apologies. Agenda item 11 is urgent decisions, which was the committee's asked to appoint members and a chair. No, it's not. Urgent decision. The committee's asked to note the urgent decision taken and the reasons for that decision. This urgent decision was the one that allowed the company who were the highest unconditional bidders to proceed with further action so that they could progress the sale, and we needed to sign the urgent decision to show goodwill effectively. We were not making a decision to sell it to them, but we were saying that basically, yes, we'll take it under offer and we'll make a decision about whether we sell it or not later. But meanwhile, because of expediency, we wanted them to continue with their process because we want the money in our bank. Is that anything to add to that?
Chair, it was just simply to remind members this is simply for noting.
Right. So any questions before I go to the recommendation? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. No need to worry on this one, Pierre. I'm not adding any recommendations. I just thought I'm very pleased for you bring this, by the way, Chair. Thank you for bringing this UD, because I was a little bit concerned that we were hearing kind of the substantive item without the UD being noted at this committee. Otherwise, it would have been at July committee, which would have been quite unusual. So I do appreciate you putting this on the agenda. My first question on this is, I see that it's done with the urgency action, the 100B, 4B of the Local Government Act. My understanding is that the Constitution lets us just bring it to the next committee, and it was signed on the 6th, and I believe committee papers were published on the 9th. So just initially an explanation of how that happened would be useful. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Piero, if you'd like to respond to that.
Happy to assist, Chair. The proposal was originally to address this issue within the last agenda item. Upon my advice, it was decided that this should be a freestanding item. So that's why it's published late. And obviously, because it was added after the agenda was published, we required the urgency provision to be adopted. Hopefully that explains matters.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Pierre. That is helpful. I can see if it was meant to be the other item and now it has to be separate. Thank you. I did have a question. So on the urgent decision itself, on previous urgent decisions, you have the decision is this, then you have some background information. On this urgent decision, which isn't exempt, it talks about proposed action decision and then lots of bullet points that aren't decisions or don't appear to be decisions to me, but they're labeled as decisions on our urgent decision form. So I can also see in our report, it says that legal were consulted as part of the urgent decision-making process. Did our head of legal see this urgent decision form before it was signed? Thank you.
Over to Pierre.
I can confirm it was sent to me, but I didn't see it.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a shame Councillor Beckett isn't here tonight because I would have liked to thank him for his work on the motion and how we might be able to develop a process that will better fix these, because I think these are part of the problems that we were talking about at full council that we seek to address. Because as a councillor looking at our urgent decision form, I don't actually know. I mean, I can get an idea of what the decision is, but an actual decision printed notice, it's not on the form. It seems that there's been a bit of a mistake comparing other UDs to this one, where the background information is put and then we have a clear decision, and that hasn't happened here. So I just wanted to highlight that, Chair, and for benefit of the public, for why we're going through this process about establishing a proper procedure for UDs and reporting them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for comments. I'll now move to the recommendation, which is that we note that the UD was signed. Can I have a show of hands to note the UD, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I will now leave you in the capable hands of Councillor Dalton. My pen was taken away because I kept clicking.
Apologies, yeah. Councillor Dallin kept clicking on his pen cap so loudly, I couldn't listen. So we had to remove his pen for a while there. We've now done the pen swap. So the final item of this evening's agenda is the commercial tenant update. So the council is looking to extend two long-term. Oh. Back on track. Thank you, Councillor Coley, for joining this evening. So we are looking to extend two long-term commercial leases on their current existing terms, which would bring in a capital receipt of 52,000. As you know, some of the papers are confidential, and if you want to go into the exempt part of the meeting, I'm afraid we'll have to ask the press and public to leave, but I will open it up to comments and questions. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sticking to the public report. It'll just be helpful. Certainly, question I had that I can see that we're getting some sort of capital receipts for the completion of this. So I think it'd just be helpful, because I'm not familiar with the sector, just to have a bit of explanation from officers on how we're receiving this. You know, are we offering kind of below market rate? What's the sort of benefit to our tenant that would allow us to get this capital receipt? Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to hand over to the officer because I actually can't answer that, Councillor Lawrence. Mark.
Thank you, Councillor. So the process for extending long leases of these on the first we've had, and the process is the same. We have our external asset valuers prepare a report. And the extension, what that effectively means is for each year that we extend it, we're receiving income, we're receiving rent. But as you'll note, these leases still have a reasonable term left. So we're valuing the right to receive additional rent at a point in the future. That is discounted because obviously a pound is worth less tomorrow than it is today. And our external valuer does that process. So we're able to prove that that's the correct sum to extend those leases. The advantage for us as the landlord is that where we have tenants that we're very happy with, we see it as securing the income, you know, very long term. The advantage for the tenants is that in the same way, if you have a residential flat on a longer term, you will receive more favourable mortgage rate, and also with a longer term, you can receive grant funding. One of these entities has access to such grant funding. Thank you.
Do you have further questions, Councillor Lawrence, on the response?
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers.
Does anybody else have any questions on this item? So if you're okay, I'm going to go to the vote. There are three decisions. First is to agree to extend the two commercial leasehold interests by 100 years and 50 years as prescribed in the exempt Appendix 1. To note that the two lease extensions will generate a combined capital receipt of 52,500 on completion. And finally, that we'll nominate and authorise the head of property and regen to take all necessary actions further to the above decisions being made to progress this lease to completion. Can I have a show of hands, please? So that's unanimous. Thank you. So that's the final item on the agenda. So I'll bring the meeting to an end at 8:46. I'd like to thank the committee for their attendance, and I'd like to thank the members of the public up in the gallery for sticking with it. Thank you.